Now, I have to laugh when I think of the notion that they meet every morning and they all huddle and say, hey, we got to be careful, so make sure that you water down everyone's drinks. I'm Edwin Ballaloy, and I run a real estate blog, and then sometimes I run a lifestyle blog just on what's happening around Orange County. And this time we happen to be doing something outside of Orange County, which is cruising. Well, my wife and I have gone on 5 cruises in the last 3 years, and we have a lot of experiences to share. One of the questions I had asked in the Facebook group was something I already knew the answer to after just taking 1 cruise was, do cruise ships water down their drinks? Well, in order to answer that, you have to really look at what the standard is, where you're coming from. And I know there are a lot of disagreements. You know, some people are saying they pour very strong. Some people swear that they knew all the tricks in the book. But then I think you have to agree, everyone comes from different areas. How they pour in their area might not be how they pour in another area. Personally, I come from Southern California. I frequent Las Vegas a lot. So then our pours do end up ranging a whole lot, but then I'll tell you kind of what the norm is around here. And then we could kind of compare that versus what we receive on the cruise ships. That just about in every area, you could have a place that pours very heavy, places that pour light. Over here, the lightest pours happen to be at the Disneyland Resort District for many reasons. It's a touristy and family area. So we could expect light pours over there. Our moderate pours will be at your restaurant bars, your nightclubs, any kind of the lounges like that. And then your very heavy pours could be over at the straight dive bars where they charge the lowest amount for drinks. And then that place is just on a totally different level. So then we could really vary on our scale there, but you can imagine as soon as we went on a Royal Caribbean ship, we were really wondering, how that compares to where we are. And just a disclaimer, this is my opinion. I know a lot of other people's opinions will vary. I'm in no way the cruise authority. So then go ahead and tell me in the comments how your experiences have varied. So to start off with, again, we have to determine what a standard is. I'm not going to necessarily use our standard over here in Southern California because, again, like I said, it varies quite greatly. In fact, I was at Joey in Newport Beach the other day. I ordered a martini.
2 vodka martinis, shaken, not stirred.
A typical martini with a vermouth rinse, where they just simply rinse the glass with vermouth, pour it out, and then the rest of it is pretty much you're drinking a shot. And to my surprise, they got out the shaker cup because of Joey's likes making martinis shaken. And I saw the bartender pour 1, pour 2, 3, and 4. So then I was wondering if she was making martinis for anybody else. I looked around the bar. There was really nobody around me, and that actually ended up being my martini with 4 shots. Now that is a little overboard, and it's not the norm over here. But let's look at Google and ChatGPT, what they say, what is the norm. They say that a martini consists of 3 ounces of vodka or gin, and then 1 part vermouth. So, the vermouth and garnishes aside, we could talk about that all day. But then let's talk about what 3 ounces is. The way that bartenders measure this is that they often have a 2-sided jigger cup where one side is 1.5 ounces. The other side can vary from 0.75 to 1 ounce. So then it's very rare over here that a bartender will use the smaller side of a jigger cup. In fact, the last time I remember someone actually doing that was when I was at Harrah's Rincon, which is the Indian resort area over close to San Diego. I was at the swim up bar, and bartender asks, I order a vodka soda, I think. And then the bartender asked me, do you want a double? And we were there for, I think, a bachelor party. So I said, heck, why not? So he proceeds to go grab the small side of the jigger cup and gives me a quote unquote double. Well, I wasn't born yesterday. I already just know that's 1 shot right there. So it's rare that's going to happen, but then we're going to compare that versus what's done on the cruise ship. But just again, to summarize, the standard, according to Google, is 2 shots in a martini for gin or vodka. With that said, let's compare it to versus our first drink going on Oasis of the Seas. So my wife and I are excited we're anxious because we had all this anticipation for months planning this trip, and then we're heading over and we're finally boarding the ship. We initially board and we go through what's called the Royal Promenade. There are bars in the Royal Promenade. We decided to skip that because we want to head up to the pool deck. So we head up to the pool deck and we head up something called the Lime and Coconut Bar. It's very festive. You got reggae music going on. The sun's shining. People's already in the pool. And I already know that you can't order a martini over in a pool bar because they don't have all the ingredients and it's a very limited bar. So I order a vodka tonic, and I forget what my wife drinks. She usually likes drinking whiskey-based drinks. So we order our first round. And then to my surprise, because over here in Southern California, when you get a pour by a bartender, they will sit there and they'll pour in front of you just to make sure that you're getting the correct pour. And in many cases, the bartender just wants to treat you good, and then in return, you're going to tip good. So to my surprise, I go order a vodka tonic, and then the bartender actually goes in the back and then he hides his pour. He turns his back, and even though he's trying to hide it, I can see from the side, he's using the small side of the jigger cup, doesn't even fill it up all the way, and then pours it. And then I was thinking maybe he poured on the side or something like that. So I didn't think really anything of it because there was just so much going on. I take my first sip of my drink and it tastes like all tonic and all ice. I asked my wife and hers was completely watered down too. So we didn't really think anything of it, but then I'm just a little irked. I'm kind of annoyed, but then just trying to soak in the atmosphere as the best I could. Well, we end up asking a lot of the people around us, because it's very social on that first day, if they have their drinks watered down too. A lot of them seem to be complaining as well. We ran into one guy who thought he had the hack. He thought he had all the answers in the world. He goes, "Hey, you got to just order shots." I just ordered my friends a round of shots, and they get a big shot tray come around to them, and those things were the smallest shots ever. And I was like, no, shots aren't the way to go. Next round, I end up just ordering a beer because they can't water down a beer. And then we go to dinner, and that's actually the last drinks that we have on that day. The next day, we go over to Coco Cay, and Coco Cay is the private island that the Royal Caribbean owns, and they have a cool swim-up bar. We go up to the swim-up bar, but fresh in my head, I'm still remembering them watering down our drinks that first day. So I go up to the swim-up bar, and I initially start off strong. Hey, let's just go order a double. So I order a vodka soda double, and what do you know? Bad memories of going to Harrah's over in San Diego. They do two sides of the small side of the jigger cup. So yeah, at that point, I'm really annoyed, but later on, we still have the 2 wine bottles that are in our stateroom. We still got like a welcome package, which included wine and cheese. So we have 3 bottles that we know that they can't water down, they can't touch. We also have our dining discounts, which I'll get to. But then later on, we go to what's called Blaze Nightclub, and we decided to go order drinks there. They were made with the full shot this time. There was actually some people and a guy that we met that bought us a round of shots. So there were actually full shots, the bigger side of the jigger cup. And we ended up going back to that bartender. We'll talk more about that later, but we ended up following him over even to the pop-up bars, and they had a pop-up nightclub later on. Needless to say, we tipped him well, and then we just kept coming back over to him over at Blaze and then to wherever else he was working. We also ended up going to what's called the Schooner Bar, which is right on top of the Royal Promenade. And we ended up making friends with a bartender there, and ended up actually on the rest of our sailing going back every time that bartender was working. And of course, we tipped well. To our surprise, my wife is usually someone who orders old-fashioned or whiskey on one big rock. I always order martini, quite frankly, because it's one of the strongest drinks that you could order, and you're pretty much just drinking a straight shot. I order a martini either dry or with a vermouth rinse, because it's very tough for a bartender to hide that they didn't pour heavy. You got that big cone-shaped martini glass, If you don't pour enough, it looks funny. It looks funny where you got pretty much all glass. I've even had some bartenders apologize and actually make me some more martini and just make sure that they fill up that glass. So when you order dry, there's nowhere to hide. It takes too long for the ice to melt, so it's not like they could just leave it in the ice for a real long time. There's really no way to hide there. And then for my wife's drinks that she orders back home, we usually will order it and we'll get a bartender that pours over the one shot. So they'll get one shot, take away the shot glass, and they're still pouring, and then take the bottle away. So given what we like to drink, we went and ordered that at the Schooner Bar. And then again, remember going back to the Google standard, what a martini is, it's 2 shots. We range from 1 full shot to 1.5 shots. I never got 2 full shots there. Later on some of our later sailings, when we really got a good rapport with bartenders, then we'd get hooked up. We'd get a full martini, and then it's rare, even with getting rapport with bartenders, that they'll give us a full martini like it is back in Southern California, let alone over at a dive bar. On that sailing and the rest of our sailings, we ended up befriending lots of bartenders. Lots of the bartenders ended up being our own kind, which is Filipino, so you can imagine that establishes good rapport. And then we got treated well, I have to admit, especially after tipping. After chatting it up with some of the bartenders, we learned that there's a certain hierarchy of bartenders. We happened to meet someone who had been with Royal for, I think, 15 years or something like that. And he worked over at what is called Voyages bar over at the Royal Promenade on Freedom of the Seas. What they get to do is they get to pick their bars, and usually the more seasoned, more tenured bartenders tend to pick the bars inside, and those bars usually are the Schooner Bar, and then over at that place it was Voyages. That means that the bartenders who are at Lime and the Coconut, and especially the pop-up bars, those are more of your newer bartenders. Some of them are not regular bartenders at all. They're just filling in and making sure that a lot of those pop-up stations are being manned. Same thing kind of over on Virgin Voyages. We met a lot of Indonesian bartenders that we ended up hanging out with. A lot of them who are seasoned, they get to pick the bars that they want to work at. And then it's kind of the same thing on Bimini Beach and Coco Cay. You're going to get more of your watered down drinks there. You're going to get more of your watered down drinks over at the pool. Now you start to wonder, is this a policy? Now I have to laugh when I think of the notion that they meet every morning and they all huddle and say, hey, we got to be careful, so make sure that you water down everyone's drinks. While it's not far-fetched, I could also imagine that happening, because if you can imagine, when someone's getting on a cruise ship, there are a few things. They're dehydrated, they're hungry, a lot of times they're anxious, and then they're going to do things that are usually out of their comfort zone, which usually means drinking more. So then you put all those things together, because you're dehydrated, you're hungry, people don't have the best tolerance. So I could imagine that policy and even agree with the policy of kind of watering down drinks. Yeah, it kind of sucks that for the people who don't get the drink package. It could be a recipe for a disaster, especially considering how many fights there have been on Carnival and even the Royal Caribbean ships recently. So what are some of the ways you could avoid feeling ripped off by light pours? Well, let's eliminate a couple of those pieces of advice first. Some people say, oh, you could just go out and you could tip heavy. So what are you going to do? Are you going to tip the person after they pour lightly, hoping that they're going to give you a better pour next time? No, I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm under the mentality that you should tip well after you've received good service, not before anticipating good service, if that makes sense. And plus, we're talking about what the norm is for this video. If you're tipping well and you're influencing the pour, then you're going outside of the norm, and you could apply that just about anywhere. We're just talking about what the norm is. If you were someone who doesn't even know the bartender and you're walking up and you're ordering a drink, how do they pour compared to back home? That's what we're really talking about here. So let's talk about the things that you can offset getting light pours. Number one, you could get the drink package, or you could get Sailor Loot on Virgin Voyages because they don't have a drink package. Drink package, you really aren't worried, because if you get a light pour, you'll simply just go back there, order a double, order a third drink, and then just keep coming back for more. But some of us, myself included and my wife, we don't order the drink package. Next thing you could do is you could stick to beer and wine. Beer and wine are pre-packaged and they can't water them down. You know, at the most they could pour wine into a glass, they could pour beer into a glass. What you get back home is what you get back on the ship. And then if you want stronger for beer, go order an IPA. Back to the math on the drink package. My wife and I, like I said, we haven't gotten the drink package on our last 4 cruises, and for good reason. We always wanted to see our final bill after paying cash for every round versus what it would have been versus a drink package. And to our surprise, our last sailing on Freedom of the Seas, we didn't even equal the equivalent of 1 drink package. So some of you might be thinking, oh, that's because you guys just don't drink. No, that's very far from the truth. We could drink heavy on some days, and then some days, you know, we just like to give our livers a break and then have a detox day. So it's rare we're just going to go hard 5-6 days in a row. More like 1 to 2 days, take a day off, another day. Some days I could go in as much as 10 drinks and I still can't justify the drink package. And here's the biggest reason. We have the 2 bottles that we could bring on board. Sometimes we get a 3rd bottle that we order through like a welcome package, champagne package, or anything like that, whether it's strawberries or with cheese or anything like that. So that right there, you have 4 times 3, that's already 12 drinks right there. And then on top of that, we have our gold discounts, which gets us more discounts off of wine and beer. And then we have the dining package discount, which gives you 40% off the bottles. Of course, that doesn't help you if you're someone who doesn't drink wine or beer, but then it definitely helps us. The math is always in our favor, and then just from that, we don't get the drink package. You know, we're not talking about doing all the other cheats of trying to sneak in alcohol. There's also a way to sneak in 4 bottles instead of 2 bottles. There's also ways to bring in alcohol from the port. But then all that aside, these are some of the things that you could do legally with good conscience that you can do to kind of offset that feeling of feeling ripped off. So those are my opinions. Again, my opinions about the drink package, and also whether or not cruise ships do water down drinks. Again, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for lifestyle blogs and real estate news.